On this episode of Tell Us a Story.
I've had women say, I have to ask my husband. My husband said no. And it's like, why wouldn't you support your wife to get healthy? I understand the culture, like all of that. But when it came to leaving another person's business or came to leaving college sports, this will help a lot of people, I think, because it's centered around self-awareness. And then the money comes with that.
Normalize that in women and having it be accepting. Now, dare I say, Christina, that you are a woman in a male-dominated business.
That's a big deal, especially in the Big Ten. Our community was so devoted to our student athletes as women. If you are smart and self-aware, you will be unstoppable.
Welcome to Tell Us a Story, the podcast by Belmont City Press, where entrepreneurs and sales professionals share their journeys, insights, and strategies for success. In each episode, our guests reveal how they've overcome challenges, established their brands, and leveraged their stories to promote their businesses so you can too. I'm Red Hilton, your host for this episode. Today I'm joined by Christina Specos, owner of Specos Enterprises. So, Christina, tell us a story.
Well, first, thank you for having me on. And part of my story is gratitude and giving back. And with my company, I help professional women aged 35 to 55 years old transform their bodies and minds in 90 days. My method is to help them cut through the BS of the fitness industry that we've been told for so many years and truly focus on adopting high-level habits that work. My ideal client that I've been working with recently is a high-achieving woman. She's striving to get 1% better every day and elevate her mind and her physique to optimize her lifestyle. So they can learn more in the audience. They can learn more about me or my program on Instagram at Christina Specos, and check out the first link in my bio for a freebie, my ultimate confidence, no BS guide to mind and body transformation.
Fabulous. Fabulous. Now, dare I say, Christina, that you are a woman in a male-dominated business?
This is true.
And do you feel that most clients that are your ideal client have been men, and that's why you're sort of singling out the women who you can sort of hone in on and help them achieve their goals as well?
That's an amazing question. So growing up working in college sports, worked in a lot of male teams. NFL athletes that came to us for combine prep, lots of athletes that came to us for, like, even the kids that we worked with summer programs, lots of men. So I got the locker room talk. I understand the culture, like all of that. But when it came to leaving another person's business or came to leaving college sports and I wanted to adopt my own business, I looked deep inside of what my journey was like with adversity and having to be a strong woman, so to speak, not just physically. The physical helped the mental, but mentally, and to make hard decisions and to have tough conversations, which is typically still a masculine trait. So being able to single out women as my ideal client or target audience is really like this mission that I have to help them understand, like, personally, I don't consider myself masculine, but I do consider myself assertive and a go-getter, and that we need to normalize that.
Normalize that in women and having it be accepting. Now, I'm just going to ask a question that may seem controversial. In order to normalize that, who has to become accepting of it? Because if it's not normal, people aren't accepting of it. Do you feel that women aren't accepting of their own agency in their life and being assertive? Or do you think that it's men that are not accepting of women being assertive because they see it as a male role? Or do you think it's a combination of both?
I think it's both, but I don't know if it is the chicken versus the egg, like which one came first, because the more I study this, and I swear, if you saw my Instagram explore page, it's like all of these random things, and a lot of it is about relationships, and a lot of things have suggested to me because I'm constantly searching for information on what is this whole gender role thing? How far have we come? Where did we go wrong with respect to the fact that the communities of single women that I'm in really struggle with dating, and they don't look like me. A lot of these are typically normal women. Maybe they're women that are mothers with kids. Maybe they're single. Maybe they're thin. Maybe they're not thin. There is no one archetype other than the fact that they're women having a hard time dating pool. So when they post some of their struggles, fitness aside, right? This is more on the roles of that masculine, feminine authority that you carry about yourself. When I see what they share in the groups for help and support from other women, it just seems as though women taking care of themselves, women having a voice, it's frowned upon. And I see that carry over into the fitness world because for how many sales calls I've ever taken over the years, I've had women say, I have to ask my husband. My husband said no. And it's like, why wouldn't you support your wife to get healthy?
Right.
If it's not about the money, if it's not about, your husband loves you, why? So I don't want to imply that men are holding women back. And I also don't want to imply that women aren't being a turn off to some men by being assertive. I'm just hoping that this middle ground can be reached. And I never want to see a woman feel lesser than because of what's in her own head. And what got put in there, whether it's from society, whether it's from a man, I don't know. But I do believe that I personally have been able to withstand challenges just by developing my physical, and the mental came along with it. And it's helped me make some hard decisions, especially the decision to move to Miami and start my own business.
Start your own business, right? So what do you think the biggest misconception is from women or men or, from anyone about a woman who is in as good a physical shape as you? Like, what is the biggest misconception, or what do you constantly feel like you're educating or battling of every day?
Oh my gosh, there's so many, but there's like 2 or 3 that really stick out. Sure. The first one is a fresh wound. The first one is a guy on a dating app said, what has to happen to someone like you to make them want to look bigger and masculine and not petite and feminine? So basically, instead of saying like, I love fitness, I've been a strength coach for 25 years, I've been in sports for 25 years, something had to happen to me for me to want to develop my body. Like, this
being healthy was a trauma response. Is that what he was saying? It was being healthy a trauma response.
Revenge body excuse. I'm like, this is my 25-year career. Like, and you know that from my profile. So by the time I had a chance to ask, why does something have to happen? He had already like deleted and blocked me, so I couldn't, which is fine because you better find out early. But on the dating side, that's one thing. On the female side, it's the common tried and true misconception of weights and lifting weights is going to make me bulky. Fat.
So they see you. Well, right. Yeah, I mean, when you talk about size versus bulk, that sort of thing. So they see you and they think, okay, if I go and lift weights, I'm going to end up looking like you. Right. And if that is not what their goal is.
I'm intentionally trying to do it as a bodybuilder, sure, which is a 24-hour-a-day thing. My sleep matters. My meals matter. Not skipping workouts or pulling back on the intensity that I need to elicit a response. That all matters. Going and challenging yourself 3 days a week, which, let's face it, most women who are just starting are not going to go balls to the wall.
No.
So that low effort of just getting introduced to it is not going to turn you into the Hulk. And that is a really tough pill to swallow because sometimes those women, if they're not strong enough to stand against toxic comments, they will get somebody in their life that says, don't get too big now. Don't get too big. Like, I've been trying to get big and this is difficult.
I know you're working on it all the time and you're not finding it easy. Do you think that is the men in their life that are saying, I don't want you to be, stronger than me, or that whole reverse domination role where men are sort of afraid of men that are bigger than them? So if their woman is as strong as them, that's that insecurity creeping out, do you think?
Not always. Sometimes it's the friend group. So I have clients, for example, they love me, they love my personality, they love my skill set, but they don't want to be like me because they just want to be skinny. And the interesting thing for me as a professional is to teach them, well, okay, your version of skinny is lean, right? Not lean with a lot of muscle, sure, but lean, like thin muscle tissue, low fat. Like that's their version of like Victoria's Secret model skinny. And I'm like, the thing that you don't understand is the process is the same. The variables get tweaked. You still need to lift weights. Otherwise, you become skinny fat. Like that person that has no tone, no shape, and it just looks like they're just wearing skin on bones. Like that's not.
That's a look.
It's a look.
That's a look.
They don't realize that like that's a different kind of extreme from a different mentality and a different problem. However, what I always reference the 90s when I grew up. So I was a teenager in the 90s, and I call it the Kate Moss era. I was constantly inundated with Cosmo and all these other magazines that she was the face. And that face was what I jokingly say, cocaine and cucumber diet, right? Like what could you really eat when you're intentionally trying to be super frail? Unless it's your genetics, right? Like some people just can't, but that's a small portion. So it gets to the point where when women think that way, it's old patterned media that also drilled into our head that skinny is in. The last thing that loops around, like from the 90s now, what 30 years later, is Ozempic. No problem with it. If the obese want to take it, which it was intentionally, and created for a reason, because it helps other different pathways and things, in the body. Seeing that celebrities are dropping so much weight and there are memes about this. Now it's going, okay, we went to the BBL era. We went to the thick and juicy as acceptable era. Are we swinging back to the anorexic era because everyone taking Ozempic now looks the same way as the 1990s models? And so that's the only like mental, societal thing that I'm worried about.
Right. So, it's funny, you mentioned Kate Moss. And as little as I know about her, I know that she was frail and thin and everything else, but she was like that when she could 100% pay attention to her appearance. And then once she got older and like had a life or had kids or everything else, she's healthy looking now. Like, you know what I mean? Like when you can concentrate on your life, you can create what you want. So I don't think anyone is going to bulk up, if they lift some weights. But I do know that one of the things when you talk to like longevity doctors, they talk about, I can tell you how long you're going to live based on how much muscle you have, because it's the muscle that sort of keeps you healthy and safe, and your bones and your body functioning, and your body working in a way that it's supposed to. So muscles aren't a bad thing. And so I can see how women being afraid of bulking up would prevent them from working out, but that shouldn't prevent you from being healthy.
The one thing when I hear the word bulking up, I think that I really need to try to have a reference point. So for example, if I'm next to a supermodel, I look gigantic. If I'm next to a more seasoned, larger bodybuilder, I look small. If I walk in the mall, I look like a CrossFit athlete, or someone asked me if I play soccer. So I think it's like the reference point that what is bulking up defined as? Because if someone is used to only seeing stick skinny, anything's going to seem way too big.
Sure.
And that's the myth that I feel needs to be dispelled, is what is your definition of bulking up when people say that they're afraid of that? Because they've got to do a lot of things right to really, really build that much muscle. However, I can understand that if somebody isn't in that stick skinny category, but they do have, a little bit of body fat, if they do build a little bit of muscle underneath it, they do eat a little bit more carbohydrates, which stores water, and they don't lose the fat on top, they'll look bigger because the fat's like a blanket. So it's really educating people on what body composition is, what appropriate nutrition is, what kind of training elicits what kind of response. And then once they buy into that, taking them through the journey of this is what's normal in your body's journey. This is what you might feel. This is what it might look like. This is what the scale might say that's totally lying to you. And so the emotional roller coaster I would take women on, well, not me, but them, and them through, I guess I should say, is more of the battle than actually prescribing a nutrition plan or a training plan.
What do you think the biggest hurdle is with regards to women, especially since that's where your focus is, getting healthy? Do you think it's the eating, or do you think it's the working out?
Depends on who they are. So here in Miami, let's take some examples of people I've encountered here who are not my clients, by the way, because it doesn't fit. I had someone I was on a consult call with, and she's like, oh, I'm only talking to you and one other person, then I'm going to decide. But this is what I need. I have no problem. I will lift heavy weights. I love being a beast in the gym. But man, I will not give up my yachts and my brunches and my alcohol. And I'm like, you don't have to give up anything. However, it's my job to manage your expectations.
Mm-hmm.
So if you tell me you want to lift heavy and you want a certain body and you want to be ripped or you want to have abs and it's not happening because the other things that you want are outweighing it, you may have to make a choice. But I'm not going to tell you how to live. I'm not creating an avatar of a perfect human. I'm trying to improve you. But by going through that journey, people realize, wow, this habit's no longer serving me, or ooh, I've been doing good, but I want to get the last extra 10 pounds off. They realize that it has to be a little bit more precise in their approach.
Mm-hmm.
So I think women who have that social scene where networkers, business owners, entertainers, like, I run meetings, I have take clients out, like the food and the alcohol is a big deal.
Mm,
But you can't out train a poor diet. So
absolutely.
it really does stem from what you're putting in your mouth and that calorie and nutrient balance. But the working out piece tends to come from the people who like to complain about not having enough time,
Mm-hmm.
not the overachiever who loves killing themselves in the gym, but just can't seem to get a lean body composition that they want because it's over in excess with all of the other extracurriculars that throw food and drinks their way that they just, societally and socially, they don't want to say no to because it's part of how they do business.
That's part of their life outside of their health. So circle back with me on your ideal client and explain to me how your ideal client can benefit from your journey and what you learned and your scars and, your wounds, you know what I mean? So that, they feel like you're a soft place to fall.
No one has ever asked me this, and I love this question because I basically said my ideal client avatar is me, and I'm high achieving. I at times get in my own way. I need someone to pull me out of it. I don't have a problem with training, but
Mm-hmm.
I love learning nuances that make it better. I'm not the person that's afraid to step into the gym, although I will work to help people like that gain their confidence. I do have some clients that were afraid to go to the gym that their confidence boomed. So it's not to turn that type of person away. But if I'm looking at me who I can help, I understand the high achiever who's had judgmental things happen in society, who wants more out of her business, out of her relationships. And oftentimes, because she has high expectations for all of those things, she feels alone.
Mm-hmm.
And we shouldn't, as high achievers, have to be lone wolves. We could create a community of high achieving women that want more. And really, no matter whether you're a man or a woman, if you're up here with your thinking when the majority of people are down here, you're going to be alone.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel creating a community for those types of women like myself, it's how I get through the day. So
Mm-hmm.
I have groups of entrepreneurs that I know I could turn to. I have groups of fit people in my same space that I know I could turn to. I have friends that, whether they are like me, say they have a few extra pounds and they're not into bodybuilding, but they get it because they're open-minded and they understand the struggle. I know that in my little buckets, I have those people. But a lot of people don't have that.
Mm-hmm.
When they want to level up in their fitness, that's the thing that holds them back. It's not that they don't know how to do the research. Maybe they don't have time to do the research. It's not that they don't know how to go into the gym with confidence necessarily. It's that getting to that next level requires someone who's been through the fire. So the fire that I've been through is judgment, previous bosses, mentors. People told me bodybuilding is going to ruin my life. Oh, are you a strength coach or are you a model? Trying to sabotage me in the professional space because I didn't fit their mold of what a college strength coach was,
Mm-hmm.
because I had a hobby that affected what I looked like and how I performed.
Mm-hmm.
If you go and your hobby is fishing, nobody knows unless you post the pictures on Facebook or bring the fish in for lunch. If you have a hobby of candle making, nobody knows unless the candle shows up on your desk. But when your hobby is constantly working on yourself, it makes some people uncomfortable.
Mm-hmm. Well, because you're shining a light on them, possibly not working on themselves.
And
You,
when I really learned how to listen to what people said, I would ask specific, like neutral questions. And when I got the answer and the answer was so out of left field that it didn't seem to make sense, it would tell me where the insecurity lied. So I
mm-hmm.
asked somebody, which this the question and the answer had nothing to do with each other, which has told me a lot about her. I said, what is your goal for retirement? Like professionally, what are you trying to do in this role here that you have? And what is your goal for the next step as you, eventually approach retirement age? Someone normally would say, I want to live near my family because they're getting older. I want to see my grandkids or my kids have grandkids or whatever. She says, I just want to eat what I want and not get fat. And as a person who was sitting there getting ready to compete at about 10 to 12% body fat, everybody complimenting me every day, I could see how that answer was rooted in the fact that I made her feel some sort of way. But it's not my fault.
Right. Right.
It's her feelings of me were none of my business. But the answer told me, like, that has nothing to do with retirement. Are you telling me that you want to just sit down and eat bonbons all day in retirement? You could do that, but you didn't say that. You
Well,
specifically said, I want to eat what I want and not get fat. I think pretty much all of America wants that.
I think all of everybody wants that, but that's not reality. And
So
it's
that
not even about
told me a
getting
lot
fat.
about
It's
what
about
she
not
was
being
thinking.
healthy. Because there are people who can eat anything and, they can be skinny fat, as you were saying, and they're just not healthy. But for some reason, the metabolism is, metabolizing the food and they're just not healthy, you know?
And this was not an answer I expected from someone who presented herself as like this big badass. Like that's a very insecure answer when someone's asking you about your career goals toward retirement.
Speaking of
Completely
career
not.
goals, what have you achieved? Because I know you do bodybuilding, you do modeling, you've worked with, the NFL and college teams and everything else. You've lived a life, you know, and there's probably we're just scratching the surface. But what are your proudest achievements? And then from there, where do we go from here for you?
I don't take enough time to appreciate this. So I appreciate the question because it forces me to reflect. Because, when you're an entrepreneur, you're thrusted into that space. You don't think back. You're always thinking if you don't think forward, nothing's ever good enough. And it's still not good enough, even if you're achieving. So to take a step back and be like, you know what? I cannot believe that my turning point year was 2018. I competed in 2017 in my first national show. I wasn't pro yet. And I went through a lot of turmoil in 2018 as I was navigating some work challenges until I decided I'm going to sell my house, uproot from Indiana, and move to Florida.
Mm-hmm.
And I look back on that year and I couldn't believe it. I was crying every day when I came home from work because it was just injustice. It was just you couldn't get through to people who weren't treating you fairly. You couldn't have no excuse was good, no justification, no proof was good enough. It was like the mind was set on you need to leave, but I can't legally fire you, so I'm going to make it miserable for you. So I went through all of that while keeping my diet tight, getting ready for 3 shows that I competed in 2018, moved to Florida mid-year. My dog died 2 months later. My mother had become paralyzed 2 years prior. So this is the first time I actually took some time after I left my job to spend a few weeks with her
Mm-hmm.
because before she became paralyzed due to a surgical mishap, they were coming back and forth to me and visiting because they're retired. And then after getting to Miami, after the dog dying and all this stuff and adapting here, I thought I was going into a training job at a gym that it wasn't all that it was cracked up to me when I got on the inside. And I'm like, you know what? You need to take a big leap into entrepreneurship. You don't know what the heck you're doing. You don't know how to do any of the online stuff, but you need to figure it out. And so that year, when I sat back after the dust settled in 2019, I was like, wow, I moved. I dealt with my mom's illness, injury, whatever you want to call it. Dog died. Like a lot of these things single-handedly by themselves can be a traumatic experience.
They would
I
bring
don't know
people to
how
their
I handled
knees.
them all at
Yeah.
once.
Yep.
I just was on autopilot, and it doesn't make me any better than anybody else, but I was pretty proud that like somehow I stayed focused and I wanted everything so badly that it just kept going. And I compared to like this year, where like the littlest things can make me cry. It's really funny. And it's like, wait a minute, you already did this to a high level. Like, who is that girl? So I have
Mm-hmm.
to sit back and take a reflection, like the way you just asked me this question, and remind myself, like, no, that's the real me. Like, just right now, she's on vacation. Like, bring her back.
Mm-hmm. So what have you, so your achievements to date, and then what's your future look like?
Well, being able to be a director in college sports, I was the associate director of sports performance at Purdue. So being able to work with two, what we call women's revenue sports. So the only two women's sports who sold tickets and made money.
Mm,
Everybody else, there really isn't much money that pays for the operating expenses. That's a big deal, especially in the Big Ten. Our community was so devoted to our student athletes as women. And when you get to other schools and other more urban areas where there's a lot more to do, college sports, especially women's sports, don't get a lot of attention. We
mhm.
had so much support. And so it was so amazing to feel like I get to be a
A part of
direct
that.
and a part of their experience and help them get their physical traits, conditioning, all these things, strength up to be able to play. I get to create the foundation, and every year I get to just grow with them and help them grow. And so that was a really cool achievement because when I downplay when I talk to friends and I downplay what I did, but like I never did anything in my life, they're like, how many people can say they were a director at a Power 5 school? And they're a woman, and they spoke on stages, and they had NFL coaches coming up to them saying, I've never heard a woman speak on these topics like this. Like, how many people could say that? So my friends remember my resume and my experiences more than I do because I'm caught in that nothing's good enough. I got to keep going forward. So I
Mhm,
would say being there and being able to have that experience is rare.
mhm.
People spend their whole career trying to get there, and I was blessed to be able to have that experience for 7 years. And then, of course, turning pro in bodybuilding is something a very small amount of the population. Like if let's just say bodybuilding is 2% of the population,
Yeah,
2% of that population probably turned
right,
pro.
right.
So I'm like, wow, like I really dedicated myself to something and saw it through to the end to the point where I was so relaxed on that day. I knew it was happening. I
Mm,
knew it. Like when champions say like, "Oh, I knew I was going to hit the game-winning shot," like that's how I felt, and I never felt that way again about anything. So it's like, okay, it really is a testament of preparation.
yeah,
I'm like that was my biggest accomplishment, preparing regardless of the circumstances that I encountered.
that's fabulous. So
It's
what are your goals that you're setting for yourself now?
I have pretty lofty goals. And sometimes they conflict with each other. So the first one is business. I
Mhm,
want to be able to grow my business to a place where I can mentor other coaches to be a part of the business and have not just them serving as coaches for the multitude of clients I plan to have, but also making that experience for them a win-win. You're not just getting paid to coach people under our umbrella, but you're going to get mentored by me. And
mhm,
I love that dual approach because I'm at 25 years now. There's so much I learned that could apply to humans, whether they were college athletes or coaches and normal women today. Like there is something to be said for just working with humans and discussing with humans and motivational interviewing humans. And I want to be able to bring that piece of what I've learned to coaches that I would love to mentor one day as part of my business. So the bottom line is like expanding the business exponentially in ways that I just don't even know how it's going to happen yet. But knowing that I could see the vision, like that's the ultimate career goal. And then the money comes with that. So whether it's a multi 7-figure company or whatever, one of these days, like that'll come. But the structure in my mind is just creating an amazing opportunity for growth for not only the people that work with under my umbrella, but also with
mhm,
clients that want to grow. And then the second personal side of that is it feels like I'm always focusing on the aesthetic, but I want to maintain an upper level athletic physique to be able to one day step on stage at the Olympia, which is a full-time job. I don't know if it's going to happen, but
mhm,
to say, you know what, it's still there in the back of my mind. It's still a
mhm.
goal. It may only be a matter of time, not an if, but when. And so those are two crazy goals. Like who says, "Oh, I want to be an Olympian and run a multi-million dollar business."
Who says you can't?
Exactly. So I keep telling myself, shut up.
I firmly believe, my friend, if anyone can, it's you. So,
I
so let me
appreciate
ask you,
you.
what is your Monty? So, what is sort of a phrase or a word or a mantra that our listeners can sort of take away today from our chat? And, it could be something that is about self reflection or inspiration or a reminder of a lesson learned. So, what is sort of something that you say to yourself to kind of get you to where you want to be?
This will help a lot of people, I think, because it's centered around self-awareness.
Mm-hmm.
If you are smart and self-aware, you will be unstoppable. And so When you're smart and self-aware, you can make all of your actions every day be centered around what serves you and your goals. And, what some people will say their higher self or their best self, from habits daily, like I work out daily, or I go for a walk daily, or I take my electrolytes, or whatever it is, or I sleep 8 hours, to social choices. I refrain from drinking. I don't do drugs. I decide to go on hikes like all of those things. Those all contribute to what serves you or what detracts from your goals. And then the caveat to that is, when you push against the grain, it's okay to be different. That's the big thing I learned. It's okay to go against the grain, and how anybody else feels about your choices being different because your vision is different or bigger is none of your business.
Absolutely. I always say it's a one-way dead end. When you get to the end, you have to look back and say, I did what I wanted with my life.
And I didn't say this as because I kind of prepared my Monty in my head to be like concise as possible, but I didn't say this part, that not a lot of people really do that because it's uncomfortable.
Not a lot of people live their lives. You are correct. I think we spend a lot of time living the life other people want us to have, so that when we we don't make them uncomfortable and then have to answer for who it is we want to be.
Which is interesting, because in certain things in life, and I hate saying this, sorry to my Aunt Linda, but there was one time I just was like, I'm not having this discussion. Because to have a question come at me that was like, this isn't part of my values, where I stand on this, I'm not doing this. It doesn't mean I love my family any less, but I've learned to be the strong one. I'm not the pushover in the family, and everybody knows it. But I've also learned not to give a crap. And I feel like there's a balance with that, where you're not rude, but people know, like, man, like, she takes care of herself. Like, she is going. Someone messaged me on Instagram the other day and says, how can I arrive at that no F's given way of being that you are? And I'm like, damn, like whatever I posted, that got her.
I think it's called boundaries. I think that's what boundaries
forget how
are.
I answered it, because like anybody that wants to message me on Instagram, just know you're going to get like 3 pages of a response if you ask a pretty in-depth question, because I'm a Gemini. I like to talk, and I like to explain, and I like to teach. And I can't remember succinctly what I said to her, but I remember mentioning community. Like, this is important for me to build one for myself and for my clients. And I remember mentioning that your goals have to be so important to you that if somebody doesn't support you, it doesn't shake you. Her thing was, oh, my kids support me, but no one else does. Then who else really matters but you? And so what this circled down to was low self-worth. So when we look at the Monty of like, okay, making your actions every day be what serves you. If you have low self-worth and you're not even willing to, say, hypothetically, put yourself as a priority, that's the part that needs to be worked on. Because I can tell you all day, take better action.
Right.
You don't believe in yourself, or you don't think you're worthy. That's where we peel back the onion and be like, okay, this is where we need to start. Squats aren't the answer. Carbs aren't the answer, but something in you feeling worthy needs to be addressed.
Well, I think a lot of people go through life, they sort of move through life listening to an external nexus of control instead of having agency in their own life. And that, unfortunately, it's sort of like that's a reflection of what other people think of you, and you start trying to manage that so that you're not making other people uncomfortable. People lapse into that people pleaser mode or whatever it happens to be. The circle starts here, I always say.
It's really interesting, especially since I feel so strongly about this. I'm certainly not the expert, because there are times where I feel like I relapse. So, for example, I was invited on a podcast here in Miami. No one is ever going to not hear this story. Like, I'm never going to live it down. I get there and it's a women's podcast. Yet they kicked me off, or before they started filming, because it was a video in person, because there was suspicion that I was transgender.
Oh my God.
So at first I was laughing, are you joking? And then when I said, hold on a second, you found me on Instagram. You had your people look at all of my stuff. You could tell I'm not a man in so many different ways, because I have more muscle than the girl next to me. The girl next to me is large, but just not in a muscle way. Why aren't you're not fat shaming her, but you're muscle shaming me, saying that I'm a transgender and then I'm going to lie about being a female. And I'm like, okay, this is just best that I leave because we're going to have a problem here. And I remember after that thinking, do I even bodybuild anymore? Maybe I get out of fitness. This is effed. And it just goes to show that like I'm pretty tough. I'm a pretty tough cookie. But the fact that that instance shook me so much that I thought, I'm just going to throw this out. Like I'm just done. Maybe I'll just do Amazon drop shipping. Like I just can't. Maybe I don't even want to work with people. Maybe I should go back to school and become a veterinarian. Like I just kept thinking these horrible thoughts that no, after 25 years, you are who you are. And this little skinny guy doesn't know and won't listen to you. So his loss
Exactly.
of could have brought to the podcast. And then interestingly enough, a week later, he sees me in the gym and apologizes because he realizes. And I was like, had honestly had blocked out what he looked like. And I forgot it was him. And I was like, I was nice to him because I didn't remember who he was. I was like, hey. And he's like, I just want to say I'm sorry. And then it clicked who he was. And I'm like, thanks. No problem.
Well,
and
it looks like you took the high road. So,
but it's to prove to people that like I'm telling you, like make your actions every day with a no F's given, like this is for you and you deserve it. But it doesn't mean that situations like that won't come along that have tested my desire to do the things I love to do. I love to train. I'm doing it for 25 years. I hope it looks like I've been benefited from 25 years of,
well, you don't ask financial advice from a poor man, like if someone is not in good shape, I want somebody who practices what they preach. If I go to get my hair cut, we won't discuss that, but I go to get my hair cut and, they look like I did their hair, I don't know that I want to listen to them, and unfortunately, as we started the podcast with, masculinity and bodybuilding and muscles and health and, assertiveness and aggressiveness and, determination, all of those things, we've assigned them to genders essentially. And at the end of the day, my hope is that, and I've said this to you before, rising tide lifts all boats. Anything I can do to make what you want in your life come true, and the same for you, for me, and everybody else. Imagine if we put this energy into getting people to where they wanted to be instead of holding them back because of how we feel about it. And that is the unfortunate part of that.
The interesting thing is like what you just said about the whole hairdresser thing and financial advice from a poor guy and all that stuff. I had a post yesterday or this morning, I can't remember. I specifically have been asking very controversial-ish questions, but from a neutral perspective on Facebook, because I'm like, okay, these people don't want to talk about squats and carbs. Let's talk about things that are going to get them talking. And so I asked, how do you feel? Obese fitness models being the face of fitness and obese trainers winning awards. What do we think about this? The fit people who work for their bodies are all like, it doesn't make sense to me. And I did look into whoever commented to the contrary, and I noticed that there was a significant difference in their habits and what they look like. Just saying how it is, in case any of these people see this. Yep, I did my homework. And I saw like the perspective of, well, we can't judge people. I'm like, no. It's not about judgment. It's about, do you embody what you're teaching? And someone brought up a point. Well, like just being shredded all the time isn't healthy. I'm like, didn't say shredded.
Yeah.
I said obese. I didn't say a few extra pounds. I didn't say I just had a baby. I didn't say going through menopause, going through a rough time, trying to figure out my hormones. I said obese. There is nothing healthy about obese. Why is this glorified as a face of fitness? This is not the face of fitness.
It is not. Yeah. I mean, generally fitness has sort of a definition. And I don't know that obesity fits in there, similar to the other side of the spectrum, that Kate Moss waif sort of thing. I don't know that that is healthy either. Healthy is healthy, Let me do the rapid fire. Let's get to know the Christina behind the Christina, behind the persona. All right. So I'm going to throw a few words at you. You tell me.
My rapid answer mode.
There you go. Just give it to me as it comes to you. Ready? Beach or mountains?
Beach.
Sweet or savory?
Sweet.
Cats or dogs? I already know the answer.
Dogs.
Yeah. Yes. There's only one right answer. Coffee or tea?
Coffee.
Sneakers or sandals?
Sneakers.
Comedy or drama?
Comedy.
Ice cream or cake?
Cake.
Really? Really?
Carrot.
So city or countryside?
City.
Yeah. You live in Miami now. When you were back in Indiana, were you in the country more, or you were near Purdue? Were you in the city?
Country. This small town was a little town, but it really wasn't the city feel. It was, City Hall.
Yeah.
City Hall building.
All right. I have a guest to guest question. So the last guest that I interviewed left a question for you. So you're ready? What famous person, alive or dead, would you want to go to dinner, and what would you eat?
I've been dying for someone to ask me this one day. I didn't know when and where it was going to happen. I love this question, and not everyone's going to like me and my answer. So we're just going to put it out there since I'm in my no F's given mode.
There you go.
I would like to have dinner with Donald Trump for many reasons.
Okay. It'll be interesting, I'm assuming.
It will be interesting, and I want the human. I don't want the character. I don't want the stereotypes of what people think. And I envision an upscale steak, filet dinner with some broccolini, some mashed potatoes, probably a creme brulee at the end. Just picture the most upscale steakhouse. Probably going to be lobster somewhere in there too.
Fantastic. When you say no F's given and that sort of thing, one thing I always, I wrote a whole chapter on in my book is, care, but don't confirm. It's okay to care what other people think, because that's how we learn. We get our feedback from other people, but you don't have to confirm their thoughts on you. So it's okay to care, because you walk around, if you say, oh, I don't care, I don't care, I don't care. Well, that then sort of puts up a wall, you know what I mean? But definitely, care, but don't confirm.
I like that. I'm going to remember that. Care, but don't confirm. Yeah. Because I think that, it kind of confirms why I'm asking all of these like controversial questions or like borderline, because I want to genuinely know, A, what people think, and B, can you discuss your point in an emotionally intelligent way? Sure. Or are you just going to be like, wow. Because I think that's how we grow. And to say, well, I agree to disagree. I'm not going to confirm that your viewpoint of this is valid if that's not what I believe, but I do believe that we can learn something from each other.
And we all have opinions.
Sometimes they stink.
Yeah. You know what the rest of that was. All right. So reiterate for me, the best place for people to find you is?
I live on Instagram and Facebook, mostly Instagram, at Christina Specos.
So it's just your name, Christina Specos?
Yep, no spaces. And that's pretty much my handle on all platforms. And then if you really want to send me a novel, Christina at ChristinaSpecos.com.
Well, that's fabulous. Well, I hope people reach out to you, because I think that they can learn from you, if not just about the fitness, about, the survival, and not giving the F's.
And what I do love, the care but not confirm, is I would love to know what people think about what we discussed today, because there's so many layers to what we talked about that it actually helps me understand people better. If you said, hey, like, I heard this about fitness, but I have a question about this, or I've heard this, like, it definitely gives me selfishly good ideas for content that actually are things that you want to know. So if you do go on Instagram and you follow me, that's where I'm going to post a lot more, a little bit on TikTok, but mostly Instagram. If you do ask me questions, it'll probably turn into content. So keep them coming.
So anybody that has an opinion on anything we discussed today, go find Christina.
That's right.
All right, Christina, thank you so much for your time. And thanks for sharing your story and your insights with us today. I appreciate your time. It's extremely valuable. And I hope I honored that here today.
Absolutely. I have to just give you a compliment. This was like the most enjoyable conversation / podcast, and most organized. Like,
now you're just disclosing my AR with OCD.
Hey, it's working for you.
Hey, I got to go with what I know.
To our listeners, if you have a story to share, visit tellasastorypodcast.com. If you're an aspiring author, a seasoned business owner, or looking to elevate your personal brand, visit BelmontCityPress.com for expert advice on writing your own success story. Trust the next chapter because you are the author. Now, tell us a story.